Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our LinkedIn Live session today. I'm Dave Mays. I'm a tax principal in KPMG's Global Mobility Services practice, and I'm here with Shipra Tereja, a managing director in our practice as well. And we're helping organizations to just navigate the tax, HR, and mobility challenges of a remote workforce. In today's session, we're just going to share with you some of the market trends that are starting to emerge as organizations are preparing for the workforce of the future. We'll explore an important distinction between providing employee flexibility to work from home versus the ability to work from truly anywhere at any time. We'll spend some time just zeroing in on some of the tax and mobility implications of a remote workforce. And then finally, we'll share some of the leading practices on how organizations are preparing to support remote from home, remote work in the long term. As organizations reacted kind of pretty quickly to enabling remote work in the early days of the pandemic, much of the focus was really understandably on ensuring that employees were able to safely perform their duties. And once the initial logistical and technology challenges had been tackled, many companies saw that productivity of their employees was actually higher than they thought would be possible. In fact, one of the studies that we did indicated that 69% of US workers said that their productivity actually increased since going remotely. And we're finding that many employees are in fact enjoying that additional flexibility that working from home can provide. And so the question organizations are facing is if they're going to continue to allow employees some of that latitude to work remotely on a long-term basis. We expect that a number of organizations will opt to continue to provide certain employees with that flexibility to work from home. But they're finding that the decision matrix is a lot more complicated than it initially seemed on the surface. For example, some of the HR teams that we're working with are trying to engage with stakeholders to map different job responsibilities and roles and levels to identify who can be afforded that kind of additional flexibility to work away from the office. Some of the tax and payroll departments are working hard to interpret how regulations will apply to their new workforce footprint, which is really no easy task given some of the challenging tax rules and the changing regulations at the local, state, and federal jurisdiction levels. Companies are really also just finding that they need to think through some of the implications across a number of stakeholders in their organization to develop comprehensive strategies to ensure successful implementation. And we've seen a pretty broad realization that developing a thoughtful strategy in the right way can be a fairly significant investment of time, effort, and energy. But we're finding that enabling remote work in the right way is already providing a number of strategic benefits to some organizations. So, for example, by opening up some new talent pools for certain roles that may not have been available in a pre-remote work world. So, some of that seismic shift towards remote work has actually caused a number of employees to consider some significant changes to their personal situation. In fact, we found that close to 59% of U.S. workers in one of our surveys said that if they knew they could continue working remotely, that they would consider actually moving elsewhere. So this shift, the shift in employee sentiment, is actually accelerating some of the action that employers need to take to develop remote work policies and to really figure out how and where they're going to land when the remote work pendulum stops. So maybe Shipra, can you maybe talk us through some of the drivers and the differences between a work from home flexibility and what a true work from anywhere model at any time looks like?
Sure. So the pendulum that Dave was talking about, as that stops swinging, the reaction from companies can fall on two extreme ends. One, when everybody is fully back in the office, and on the other end, where they are fully remote, or as we call it, work anywhere. However, what we feel, there will likely be a middle path where employees have the flexibility to work remotely a few days a week or a few days a month. And let's call that work from home for the purpose of our discussion today. So, distinguishing that from work anywhere. So, to put that in context, under a work from home model, individuals will still be employed in the same location, and their designated work location will also probably remain the same. So, say I was, I am employed in the New York office. I will continue to be employed in the New York office even if I work elsewhere. However, there will be some flexibility as to when I need to go into the office. Again, continuing that example, my office location is, say, New York. I live in New Jersey. So instead of schlepping to work every day, I may go into the office maybe 2 days a week. And that too for team meetings, collaboration, brainstorming, and co innovating. We think of this as heads up time that we need to be in person in together to get something accomplished. On the other hand, under the work anywhere model, it would mean that employees are still employed in one location, say New York, but they have the ability to work in another location. So, again, using my example, I may still be employed by the company that's based in New York, but I may actually be able to move to a warmer place. Much warmer location is what I would prefer right now. Say the beach somewhere, even somewhere, say in Mexico. Dreams come true. So, the key difference in these models will be how far from the office location can employees be based. With the work from home model, you expect to see more of a hub and a spoke model emerge. So you would be expected to remain within the commuting distance to the office, while in a work anywhere environment, the whole world may become your oyster. Radius around the office location dramatically increases in that situation. So clearly, from tax, regulatory, and human considerations, under both scenarios, there will be differing implications. And organizations are getting prepared to address that eventuality based on their industry and talent makeup. We do expect more of planning may be necessary for the work anywhere model, as that would be new and uncharted territory for many companies while they've had work from home policies for a while. So, to make this real from my perspective, the key elements in determining whether you provide flexibility to work from home or truly go towards a work anywhere model is largely driven by, say, four factors. First, being the industry that the company operates in. The trend in that industry will drive whether organizations need to adjust their operating models to compete for talent. Example, say you are in the tech industry and everybody else is providing location flexibility. You may need to do the same. We're seeing more and more companies listing job openings saying remote option available or location flexible. So the talent pool is going to expect that. As well as from a company point of view, the talent pool would have broadened, and the company will need to adjust to compete for talent in that market. Additionally, not only just the industry, the company needs to be very intentional about which roles can be moved to a work anywhere model and which roles may fall into the work from home category. I think there will be work from home category will be much more common in the near future than it has been in the past. It will become, and it has become, much more socially accepted than it has been in the past. Another factor that will be key in going down one path or the other will be the technology breakthrough. The technological advancements we saw within the last year due to the shutdown have actually put us on a path where a number of meetings and work can occur and will occur remotely and effectively. So I don't think the days of virtual realities in our meetings are too far out. Perhaps the next time we do this, we'll be in a virtual reality world and I would be able to see you and you'll be able to see me real time sitting next to me. It's going to happen soon. So those advancements will really help how companies bring people together and when. The next piece of very importance is company culture. That'll be real big key here. I've spoken to several companies that think that being together in the same space is vital for collaboration, for teaming, as well as for control, risk management, and regulatory compliance purposes. Clearly, companies with a strong in-person culture will lean more towards occasional work from home. On the other hand, companies that have seen increased productivity and increased morale in the last few months may start to explore work anywhere model slightly more. However, to make a work anywhere model a success, the first change that must occur is that focus has to be on output and productivity rather than process, rather than how and when the job gets done. On those lines, we expect companies will also depend on being able to provide flexibility around the day-to-day work schedule. So think about if I actually was able to move to Mexico, will I be in a different time zone depending on who I'm working with? So companies will have to allow for some flexibility when a person starts their day, when they end their day, etc. And finally, and very importantly, again, this is very near and dear to my heart. This is what I live and breathe all day, is the impact of tax and regulatory considerations. Working and living in two different locations has a number of tax and regulatory considerations, both for the employee and the company. And we're finding that direction to either work from here, home or work anywhere is often coming from the C-suite. And it's the HR and the tax professionals that are working to build out guardrails, policies, and processes to make those visions come true. I've spoken to many companies, and they're finding that they are towing a fine line between incorporating flexibility and making sure they can remain compliant given the resource constraints they were already dealing with. So, Dave, would you mind walking us through some of those detailed tax and regulatory considerations that you see should be top of mind in this environment?
You bet. Thanks, Shipra. And as companies are trying to determine how flexible their remote work strategy should be, and how closely it's going to approach that true work anywhere model that you described, they really need to thoughtfully consider, who's able to work remotely, from where, and for how long. And those are really the primary factors that'll drive a number of the tax considerations. So the tax issues here kind of run the gambit from individual income tax, social security, employment tax, and payroll tax issues, as well as corporate tax, just to name a few. But maybe what we'll do is just start with some of the corporate tax implications. At a high level, when a company has employees working in a state, for example, the tax authorities may deem it to have a taxable presence in that state. When a company has employees working in states where they didn't previously have employees, they may need to register in that state and work with their corporate tax teams to apportion some of the income differently than had happened in the past. A similar concept applies at the federal level. So having employees work remotely in a foreign jurisdiction, for example, runs the risk of creating a permanent establishment or taxable presence in that country. And that can subject the corporation to corporate taxes on the profits that are generated by the employees. In addition to some of the potential incremental tax burden that can come up there, there's also some additional regulatory compliance activities like registering and corporate tax filings that would come along with that. So the employee movement and the changing roles that the employees play for the organization, the reporting lines, can really shift the value that's associated with the different functions globally, which can then in turn impact some of the transfer pricing and ultimately the allocation of profits on a global basis. So, a number of these changes in a company's workforce footprint has a lot of my international tax and transfer pricing colleagues incredibly busy helping organizations just to understand what some of those challenges and some of the changes may be so that they can set expectations and do some planning around those implications. From a payroll perspective, I'll say the payroll tax departments are fielding a lot of questions these days. Some of the remote employees are living and working in a jurisdiction that's different from where they're employed. And in generally, we'll say generally, a lot right now. If an individual is living and working in a location in a particular state or country, that jurisdiction's generally going to look to tax some of the income that the individual earns there. And that means that the company may have a payroll reporting and withholding obligation in that location as well. In the US just state context, employers are trying to determine which state or states to withhold for their employees. And so this decision has been complicated by some of the telecommuting rules in a number of states. States like New York, for example, have had these rules on the books for a number of years, while some other states instituted some temporary telecommuting rules just as the pandemic hit, states such as Massachusetts and Rhode Island. In the international context for employees that are working in a different country from their country of employment, it also raises some income and social tax complexities for both the individual as well as the employer. So clearly no shortage of tax challenges that need to be addressed here, and so it's important to have a good handle on your organization's risk tolerance. We understand there's often a desire to be 100% compliant with all of the tax rules in this space, but we also know that that's not as likely to be the reality for many organizations and where they are today. So again, corporate risk appetite is going to influence some of the actions that you'll take as an organization. Those organizations with a higher risk tolerance may choose to only mitigate some of the highly visible exposure. For example, some of that of their senior executives and some of the exposure that may have been created by their movement. So the short answer here is, no two organizations are going to be coming at this in exactly the same way. But maybe Shipra, if you will share just some of the leading practices that we've seen and how companies are starting to tackle these.
I'm so glad you asked that, because at this point in the conversation, our clients often go, okay, you shared with me a ton of detail. How do I make it real? What do I do to make it actionable? So clearly, whether are you going down the work from home, work anywhere option, they both will come with their own set of challenges. And companies are defining what those guardrails should be for their organization and for their people. This is top of mind for all of our clients today. And to make this manageable and tackle this systematically, we came up with a simple stepped approach that is proving to be effective in building an efficient and a customized plan. So our first starting point is that we start with defining the types of arrangement the company expects to see based on the role of the employees, the types of functions and services they perform. So in this step, it is critical to also understand the current employee footprint as it stands today and where we expect to see it in the future. This will often help build out the various scenarios a company dealing with into small, manageable chunks. The second piece in this process is, and very critical, is that we work with a cross functional stakeholder team to build out a decision criteria for approval for each type of the arrangements that we are talking about. And in this decision criteria, we often find there are differences, whether it's a work from home model or a work anywhere model, as the level of risk for each of these models will vary from circumstance to circumstance. So often, when we're working with stakeholders, we build out different swim lanes based on whether it might be a work from home or a work anywhere arrangement. So going back to the stakeholder team, the makeup and the remit of this cross-functional team is crucial. If it should have representation from tax, HR, comp and benefits, legal, finance, payroll, cyber, as well as business. Whether it's going to be a more robust work from home model than you had previously or a work anywhere model, companies are undergoing a huge transformation, and the whole organizational machinery needs to be brought on board and on the same page. Next, and I find this personally most interesting, is performing a quantitative and a qualitative analysis for the various arrangements. I'm a data geek, and this step really helps me frame where there might be the greatest risk, and therefore need for more planning, need for more focus on a structure and policy controls. Versus where risk is minimal, it can be business as usual. So, from a quantitative assessment perspective, we also often look at the impact on the individual, impact on the company, as well as impact on the cost of operations, including compliance and change management related costs. Moving on to the qualitative review, and obviously this will be the softer side of things, harder to measure, but we do want to make sure we consider the impact on talent, on culture, on operations, and on sustainability of the organization's operations. And those all those factors are perhaps baseline really, and every organization can usually and have some very specific analysis needs in this process. The outcome of this stage of this analysis is very telling and lays the groundwork for operationalizing the program moving forward. So the last and final step of this approach is really development of the detailed processes to support the remote work arrangements. This is where all the planning comes to life, and you design and implement processes to support seamless and compliant operations. This will include stakeholder sign-offs, vendor initiation, ongoing monitoring and reporting, as well as built-in health checks that help you assess the success of the program and its overall return on investment. We're seeing mobility was, of course, limited to a handful of people in the organization earlier, and it was obviously easier on that light to manage with simple tools such as Excel-based data sets. However, work anywhere and work from home are expected to impact and cover the entire breadth of the population of an organization. And therefore, organizations are laying heavy focus on automation and leveraging current technology resources such as ServiceNow, Workday, Oracle to assist with data flow as well as one central source of truth for compliance and monitoring. Companies are scaling payroll and compliance systems to allow for tracking of employees, building automated systems for withholding and reporting and remittance overall. We know this is an area which will need concentrated effort, but it will help companies tremendously down the road in incorporating the new normal into their operating models. So really, those are the four steps that we would usually go through to bring it home.
And thanks, Shipra. And so we've covered a number of things here, and that are important to consider as your organizations you're really trying to determine where that pendulum is going to stop for you. One of the key takeaways clearly is to engage with stakeholders across your organization to create that cross-functional team to design your remote work program in a methodical way. And of course, making sure that you have the right advisors like KPMG along with you through the ride and to be successful. Thank you so much for joining our LinkedIn Live session today. Thank you.